All right, well, we continue our coverage of Missouri sports wagering, the legalization process last week. We mentioned the Missouri House passed a sports wagering bill, and it is on to the Senate. And to talk a little bit more about the progress with that, excited to welcome in one of the sponsors for a sports wagering bill on the House side. It's Missouri Representative Phil Christofanelli, kind enough to give us some time here. And let me start with your reaction to being able to get this bill passed last week in the Missouri House.
Well, it's an important step forward. Obviously, we still have a long ways to go with getting through the Senate, but we've shown in the House that sports wagering is a priority. It received strong bipartisan support. I think over 115 votes in favor. And, we have a straightforward bill that delivers on a much needed issue for our constituents. And I am hopeful that the Senate will take it up and pass it.
What's your feeling compared to a year ago, where a sports wagering bill came out of the House a year ago, and then we know it never got to a vote? It stalled out in the Senate. Talking to your colleagues there, both on the House and the Senate side, is there much of a difference here a year later compared to where we were a year ago, prior to a neighboring state like Kansas getting it legalized?
Well, I think we have a different crop of senators up there. We had an election in between then, and there's a whole new crowd of folks. And so the dynamics are different. Some of the personality conflicts have subsided a little bit. The Senate in general has been more functional than it's been in the last couple of years. They're working through really tough and weighty issues. They're spending time on the floor to take on the big stuff. So I think that we do have a better shot this year than we did last year, but there still remains, political problems around the implementation of this bill and really any type of expansion of gaming. And we're going to see how those play out over on the Senate side coming soon.
There's no question that the topic that has come up around the holdup has been these VLTs, these video lottery terminals. Is that still the biggest obstacle at this point? People can look at tax rate, and it's 10% in the bill that you guys passed through the House, and that's something that I think even a colleague of yours, Representative Dan Houks, had mentioned, that you guys are willing to maybe negotiate on the tax rate. But how problematic is perhaps the desire of some to add video lottery terminals to this bill?
Sure, and we've certainly debated video lottery terminals for a number of years in the Missouri legislature, and it always comes up as an issue when we're talking about sports wagering bills, because some people say if we're going to expand gaming in one place, we should expand gaming in another place. I think that VLTs have their merits, and those should be debated. So far, our bill that we passed out of the House was really exclusively focused on sports wagering. I know there's a separate bill that addresses VLTs. I think it's going to be voted on in committee in the House side this week. And certainly one of the things that happens is when you send bills over to the Senate, some people, want to pass their bill first, or they say, if you're going to pass this bill, then we got to pass my bill too. And there's some of that going on. But really, I think we need to get past that. I mean, the people in Missouri have demanded sports betting. It has overwhelming support on both sides of the aisle. And we're being left behind by virtually every other state that is touching us right now. They are implementing a sports wagering framework, and that's revenue that is flowing out of the state of Missouri and into the pockets of other states that have been able to work through these political issues. And so I'm hoping that the Senate will do the right thing. I think all the ideas deserve debate on the Senate floor, but I think that we can probably get this one done and look at other gaming opportunities down the line.
How much have you heard maybe more in the last calendar year from your constituents? I know you're on the eastern side of the state, and so Illinois had legalized sports wagering for multiple years, whereas here closer to Kansas City, it's just now the first 6-7 months of people going from Missouri over to Kansas, because we all know people that have done that. How much do you think that is increased perhaps the appetite for those that may be against gaming, but they recognize the tax revenue from betting, but people maybe are staying at hotels, they're maybe eating, they're spending money on gas in another state?
Yeah, there's certainly a number of economic multipliers that come with an opportunity like this. And yes, we are losing a considerable amount of money. I think there was something like $1 billion placed on the Super Bowl in the last couple months, and we've seen other states raise tens of millions in tax revenue from their sports wagering. And keep in mind, there's right now in the state of Missouri a lot of illegal sports wagering going on that has none of the regulatory protections that our bill enjoys. There's no age verification. There's no addiction protections. There's really no protections at all. There's no oversight of where that money goes or making sure that the bets were fair. And so we need to have a legal and regulated framework, because the reality is that sports wagering is happening all around us, and it's better to have a safe and regulated version of sports wagering than what we have right now.
I'm sure there's some people watching or listening, and anytime they hear the video lottery terminals and VLTs come up, they wonder, what does it have to do with sports wagering? I guess what would you say? And I understand the House bill does not have VLTs attached, but what would you say to those that wonder why they have to be intertwined and why one cannot get through without the other, so far at least?
Well, it's a unique dynamic of the Missouri Senate. We have 34 senators. They all have unlimited filibuster power. And so it's not uncommon if one senator wants something that they'd ask other senators to bring their thing along before they give the opposing senators what they want. And it's really, just a political dynamic of the Missouri Senate. Really, the only two things that these issues have in common is they both have to do with gaming, and so I'm hopeful that we can work past the tit for tat style of legislating and just take issues one at a time, work through their merits, and make compromises based on the bills themselves, and not adding different parts of other legislation to separate issues.
You had mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation on the House side, there's a separate, VLT bill. So it sounds like if there was a VLT portion attached to sports wagering, I understand the casinos are clearly not in favor of that, but is that something that you think would have support if VLTs were attached from other legislators at this point in time?
Well, it certainly wouldn't be a deal breaker for me. I voted in favor of video lottery terminal legislation in the past, and I think that there's certainly some merit to those bills. If we got a bill back that had both VLTs and sports wagering on it, I would vote in favor of that as well. The only thing I don't know is we've never had an up or down vote on video lottery terminals on the House floor. So I can't say with certainty that there are 82 votes there for that proposition. And I've encouraged, leadership to bring a VLT bill to the House floor just so that we can see where the votes are at. And if they've got, enough votes to get their issue across the finish line, then it's probably not as big of a deal as it gets added on to sports wagering. But there's just still a lot of unknowns there, and I think we got to work through the legislative process to figure out what the path forward is for both of those issues.
What's your feeling on 7 weeks now until the session is wrapped up? The one thing that I've pointed out to some is it seems like at least we're earlier in the calendar year than we were a year ago, talking about this where the time ran out. 7 weeks, your optimism on this actually getting done in 2023?
Well, hope springs eternal till the gavel falls, signing die in mid-May. So I think that there's certainly a path forward on sports wagering legislation. There's probably a path forward on video lottery terminal legislation as well. It's impossible to predict what's going to happen. Generally, there's over 3,000 bills filed on both sides of the building. Typically, only about 50 of them become law. But this is a really big issue. It's something that a lot of people care about. There's a lot of people in the building that are working on this issue. There's a lot of our major institutions that want to see us get this done. And so I think that it's certainly possible. And I know that I'm going to continue working until the final day of session to make sure that we get it finished.
Representative, really appreciate the time.
Happy to be on.
Perfect.